I don't know if the Raiders can finish higher than the 20th ranking I have on them heading into this season. But I do know one thing. Playing this team is gonna suck this year. Welcome in, everybody, into the top 20 of teams in my deep dive series here, as today we take a deep dive into the Las Vegas Raiders. Certainly a surprise, I think, for many to see this team ranked as high as the 20th team. I think a big part of that is you can make an argument that this team improved more than any team in the league this offseason. And with that, I want to jump right into our first segment for the series, looking at the offseason changes with the Raiders. And first of all, looking at the coaching staff and the quarterback room in tandem together, where the Raiders are going from a head coach in Antonio Pierce that frankly was not an NFL head coach. He got the opportunity after winning the locker room over as the interim coach in 2023, but he proceeded to prove that he was not on anybody's list of head coach candidates for a reason. So they go from that at head coach and a quarterback room of Gardner Minshew, who was always going to be a bridge starter for this team, and, the likes of Aiden O'Connell, a year two player who's always projected as a backup in the league, and even Desmond Ridder, who I spent like 10 videos in last year's deep dive series roasting for how bad he truly was in Atlanta. Needless to say, not an NFL caliber quarterback room. They go from that combination of coach and quarterback to now Pete Carroll as the head coach, the definition of a floor raiser at that spot, someone that's had countless success in this league, and Chip Kelly next to him as the offensive coordinator, stepping in as well for the shoes of Luke Getsy, who got fired last season, and then Scott Turner, who I think did a better job in the interim as the offensive coordinator, but a pair of really nice additions to the coaching staff. And then at quarterback, they get a real player in the building in Geno Smith, who I would argue was the best available quarterback option to be added for any team for the 2025 season. If that makes sense. Like, would I rather have Cam Ward on this team? Yes, obviously. But is Cam Ward for sure going to be better than Geno Smith this year? Hard to say, right? I think Geno Smith was the best quarterback to be added to a quarterback room for the upcoming season, and the Raiders landed that. Coaching and quarterback play are the two core pillars for any NFL team. So for the Raiders to go from what they were working with in those two spots last year to what they now have for this season, it is a tremendous upgrade together. But it was not just those two spots where the Raiders are getting better from last year's team to this year's team. Running back, not as important of a position as quarterback or head coach, but still important. They also are going from what was arguably the worst running back room in the NFL last year, with the disappointments of Zamir White and then Alexander Madison stepping in, Amir Abdullah playing over a third of their snaps last year. Arguably the worst running back room in the league last year. And yeah, they go and draft Ashton Ginty in the top 6 of the draft, one of the most applauded running back prospects of the decade. So that makes 3 aspects of this team here: coach, quarterback, running back, all massively upgraded from what this team had last season. Then you go through the rest of the offensive roster. Tight end, staying neutral, they lose Harrison Bryant, who played about 20% of their snaps as a backup tight end last year. They bring in Ian Thomas to fill those shoes. At wide receiver, also big upgrades. No losses here, unless you want to talk about the 3 games that Devontae played last year. But they do add a bunch of pieces to this group, mostly rookies. So Jack Besh, the biggest of which in the 2nd round out of TCU. But they also bring in the deep threat, Deontay Thornton, out of Tennessee in the 4th round. And then a quarterback conversion project in Tommy Mellott will be fun to follow. And then also, hey, Colin Johnson, sneaky little pickup here. Not too much to focus on here, but he might have some opportunities to regain some steam in this Raiders receiver room as well. So I do say upgraded, a lot of interesting and exciting bodies into that wide receiver room that was quite thin last season. And then on the offensive line, I went with neutral here. They do lose Andre James. Certainly took a step back last year with this Raiders team than what he had been in previous years, but still a starter for them who played 2/3 of the season's snaps. And it's not like they made major additions here. They signed Alex Kappa, who really struggled last year. They're hoping for a bounce back year from him. They actually gave him 2 years, $11 million, and he might start at guard for them. And then they spent a pair of third-round picks on some really good athletes in Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers. So I, again, said neutral on the offensive line, but it is a room, as we'll see later, that does have a pretty nice list of talent that they are counting on to get even better this season. Now, it's not so clear-cut with the defensive changes. A lot of movement here with this new regime coming in, although it is still the same defensive coordinator in Patrick Graham, but a lot of moving parts nonetheless. So on the interior of the defensive line, I said to be determined on whether this group will be better or not. They'd lose veteran John Jenkins, not something you're really worried about, but their only real additions were a 4th-round pick in Tonka Hemingway. I wasn't quite as high on him, certainly compared to where they drafted him. And then J.J. Pegues, who's kind of this interesting chess piece athlete on the defensive line / fullback room. Neither of those rookies, I would say, are enough to say any form of upgrade on the interior of the defensive line. However, one of the biggest questions hanging over the entire season for this Raiders team that in many ways could make or break this 20th team ranking here is what happens with Christian Wilkins. In recent weeks, some injury concerns have risen back up on Wilkins, and this is one of those deals that the series must go on, right? We don't know what's going to happen with Wilkins. If he's unable to go, the Raiders would not be the 20th best team in football. But before he was seen in a walking boot a couple of weeks ago, it was fully projected that he would be making his return to this team after he was the highest paid free agent not named Kirk Cousins in the 2023 offseason, and he only played 4.5 games for them last year. So if he can get back healthy, that would be a major upgrade for this Raiders defense and defensive line, something I think this team is kind of counting on here. And it's certainly not a guarantee that he will or won't be out there for them. It's just a clear, to-be-determined wild card factor for this defensive line. But if he can't go, technically the interior of the defensive line could be even downgraded from what they had last year because they at least got 4.5 games from Christian Wilkins last year. So we'll have more to say about that in the defensive roster breakdown with Wilkins. But on the edge, this I feel very good saying upgraded, if not massively upgraded. You guys, Max Crosby didn't regress last year. He didn't just magically go from one of the most impactful defensive players in the league over the last 3 years to just being an average pass rusher out of nowhere. He had a high ankle sprain in week 2 that if Max Crosby wasn't a true lunatic in the best of ways, who has played through some crazy injuries before, none as significant as this one, most players would have shut it down. And the film does not lie. Max Crosby was battling through a high ankle sprain that did eventually force him to shut things down for the final month of the season. But they go from whatever Max Crosby was last year to presumably at 28 years old, now fully recovered from just a ankle sprain, to getting, one of the most elite defensive players in the league back, a true defensive player of the year candidate type of guy. That is a major addition for this team. And not just that, they also add Malcolm Kuntz back to the mix here, who had huge expectations last season, was awesome in 2023, had a big breakout year, was heading into a contract year, one of the most devastating injuries for a single player in terms of what it meant for his earnings. Malcolm Kuntz tears his ACL in the offseason, now fully recovered from that. The Raiders give him a nice 1 year, like $11 million contract to come in and then get that big deal that he really had kind of deserved after what he did in 2023. So 2 massive additions to a very important edge group. if you pair that with them hopefully getting Christian Wilkins back out there, the defensive line together could be the most upgraded unit in the entire NFL. Now, after everything we've just said, which is very much positive in terms of getting additions to this team compared to what they had last year, there are some downgrades with this defense as well. Unfortunately, at linebacker, they lost Robert Spillane in free agency. I was very surprised they didn't kind of match his contract and try to get him back. He's been so good for this team. The Patriots pay him big bucks to come over, so they lose him. And then Divine Diablo as well is someone we talked about in the mix for a starting job with the Falcons now. He was okay for them, but played 61% of their snaps last year. They're trying to fill those shoes with kind of just journeyman veteran types at this point. I mean, Jermaine Pratt has been in Cincinnati for a while. I think he's entering the journeyman veteran ages of his career here as he comes over to the Raiders. Landon Roberts has been a journeyman run defender for sure. Devin White has absolutely become a journeyman. And then Cody Lindenberg, a 7th-round pick out of Minnesota. Like, those are pretty minor additions to the linebacker room. Each individually are adequate dart throws, but big shoes to fill, especially with Robert Spillane, who was playing damn near to Pro Bowl level for this team. And then at cornerback, I say slightly downgraded. There's some intrigue with the room as it is today, but Nate Hobbs, who did miss some time last year, but played half the season and is a good player. He gets a good contract from the Packers. He's gone. And then Jack Jones, who did struggle last year, but was a full-time starter for them. He's also out the door. They release him. As far as additions, they bring in Eric Stokes, a nice Band-Aid veteran on the outside for the corners. And then they spent a 3rd-round pick on the very fascinating Darian Porter out of Iowa State. They're getting a little bit younger in that cornerback room. It's not a lost cause, but at least for now, that group is slightly downgraded. But then at safety, they are slightly downgraded as well. They let Trayvon Merrick walk. He gets a massive contract from the Panthers. I frankly can't blame the Raiders for not wanting to give that much money to Trayvon Merrick. I just don't know that he's quite that big of an impact on a defense, so I can't really fault them there, but it is a loss. They went more to the bargain bin with Jeremy Chin, who had a nice year for the Commanders last year. So I really don't hate that. I think the group, yes, is slightly downgraded, but I actually agree with their process. I would rather give Jeremy Chin 2 years, $12 million, as they did, than Trayvon Merrick 3 years, $51 or whatever it was he got. And then with the special teams, very little change. Really, the only thing of note is Amir Abdullah, who did some return work for them, is no longer in the building. So a massive list of changes for this team. One thing is for certain. This Raiders team is going to look a lot different than what they did last season. Likely for the better. But as we continue through the video here, I do want to ask you guys if you could take just a second to hit that like button down below. It's a free, quick thing that really does support my channel. It tells YouTube that you enjoy the video and to push it out to other Raiders fans and NFL sickos just like you. And also make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of these deep dives as we lead up to the #1 team in these rankings throughout this summer. But let's get into the coach and scheme segment here and break down this new look coaching staff in many ways, although Patrick Graham on the defensive side of things makes his return, which is something I think Raiders fans should be excited about. We'll talk about him, but we do have to start at the top with Pete Carroll coming in as the head coach. And this was a hire that just makes a lot of sense for the Raiders, who have done a lot of soul searching over the last 3-4 years. Since they fired John Gruden, they have not had a culture of belief in this building. And the moment Pete Carroll steps into this building, every player in that locker room can look to the top of the pyramid and say, hey, we have a coach that has done this before. He's won national championships and Super Bowls, and his kind of enthusiastic optimism just permeates throughout an NFL organization, and that is going to lift all tides here for the Raiders. It makes a lot of sense why they hired him. He's 74 years old. He's not going to be here forever for this team, but I do think for where the Raiders are at, they reached a fork in the road where they could either go tank mode and tear this thing up and maybe trade Max Crosby and go that route, or they could try to compete. And yeah, some fans might prefer to just do the tear it down, tank and rebuild style. As we know, most ownership groups, especially one with Tom Brady at the helm, is not going to make that decision. They want to compete and save their jobs. And, there's a human aspect to this, right? If you go tank mode, everybody's going to lose their job eventually. And that's a tough decision to make. So I understand them going the Pete Carroll route. And I think it makes a lot of sense as a hire. Is he going to be the highest ranking head coach for me at this stage in his career after things did flame out in Seattle eventually? No, I've got him as the 22nd best head coach. And even that overall coach and culture ranking, that sort of benefit of the doubt slider that I give to all of these teams and that ranking there, they also come in right around that area where I have Pete Carroll as a head coach, 19th to 22nd. Granted, they still have work to do to become this great culture. They look across the pond in this division with what Harbaugh did for the Chargers in that sense of establishing toughness and team chemistry. Pete Carroll does still have a ways to go before that is established here with this Raiders team, but in another, situation with a different head coach, the Raiders probably get more of a D grade and rank towards the bottom of the league. So that is really why Pete Carroll is brought in here, to kind of lift the mood in the organization, that culture building CEO type of hire here. And I do, generally speaking, believe that Pete Carroll can deliver upon what they're asking him to do, especially because I think he has a pair of really, really talented coordinators next to him. And this Raiders coaching staff, as much as any team in the league, is really kind of a trident approach. You have Pete Carroll as the overseer at the helm, bouncing from position room to position room, inspiring player confidence, feeling out the locker room, like developing that aspect of the team, as we discussed. And then you have Chip Kelly, who's been a head coach for 15 years of his career at this point. He's going to run the offense. He's going to do his thing there. And then I would imagine for the vast most part, Pete Carroll will let Patrick Graham handle the defense. Now, Pete does have a defensive background. He's going to have some say in terms of what tendencies he wants Patrick Graham to lead by, whether it's be a blitz-heavy team or focus on this, focus on that type of stuff. But it is, for the most part, kind of two assistant head coaches here, one on the offense, one on the defense, working in tandem with Pete. And I think that's a natural setup. Really, the only downside to doing that is you are going to be at risk of losing your coordinators to head coaching positions at some point. But in the case of Chip Kelly, that's pretty unlikely. That's part of what makes that hire so nice. He's been a head coach in the NFL multiple times. He's into his 60s here. I don't know how much room there is for him to be poached. Maybe someday Patrick Graham gets into that discussion as well. But at the same time, the fact that Pete Carroll is 74 years old, either of these guys could kind of fill into those shoes at some point. So you might have a pair of head coach candidates being groomed here as well under Pete Carroll. So the hire does make sense for me. Everything adds up, and it's all in line for this to work well for the Raiders. Let's talk a little bit more about Chip Kelly first, then we'll talk about Patrick Graham. And of course, we'll talk about what this team's going to look like scheme-wise on both sides of the ball as well. But Chip makes his return to the NFL after an interesting career. Things went really well in Philadelphia for a year. Then it flamed out. Then he didn't work as the Niners head coach before Kyle Shanahan got there. And then he takes the UCLA job for 5 years. Didn't really do too much there, to be honest. Had some decent seasons, but really most recently going to Ohio State, working hand in hand with Ryan Day. I think Chip Kelly really found himself as a play caller and offensive guru once again. He had really had about almost 10 years there where we didn't really discuss Chip Kelly too much as this awesome scheme lord, if you will. But obviously that Ohio State offense has a ton of success. They win a national championship. And I think most importantly, we saw from Chip run his offense a little bit differently. That Ohio State offense, if you hadn't told me that Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator, like I would have had no idea. Because you go back to his original boom onto the scene, it was the no huddle spread offense was just taking everybody by storm. But that wasn't really what he did at Ohio State. It was so much more of a pro-style offense, obviously with a lot of NFL talent at Ohio State, but more under center, a more diverse under center run game, all married with, yes, some of those core spread principles as well. Occasionally tapping into Will Howard in the read option, shotgun design run game. Yeah, getting the ball out in the flat in the hands of their playmakers, using the quick passing game as an extension of the run game. Those core spread concepts are still in there, but he called much more of maybe like what we see, honestly, from Shane Steichen's offense in Indianapolis that we just discussed in our last deep dive, is kind of that modern pro spread style offense. Or frankly, like Kansas City Chiefs was another offense that I think you would have seen a lot of similarities between Andy Reid and the Chiefs offense and what Chip Kelly was doing for the Buckeyes last year. So that is now going to come in here for the Raiders, and I think there's a lot of reason to believe that this version of Chip Kelly is the most prepared, sustainable version of Chip Kelly in the NFL, assuming things are going to look similarly, which I would imagine they will. So that's kind of the style of offense we're going to see here. I think, he still has to prove himself. I'm optimistic for a new hire here. The rankings are solid for the Raiders to start here with Chip Kelly. They get C+ grades across the board for the offensive coaching. So 23rd to 30th for pass game coaching, 19th to 27th for run game coaching, but certainly room for that to climb here, of course. And like I said, wouldn't be stunned if 3 years from now they promote a 65-year-old Chip Kelly to be their head coach here when Pete Carroll inevitably does decide it's time. But hey, Pete Carroll, I don't know what's in that bubble gum, but that dude is an ageless wonder. He looks about the same age as Chip Kelly, to be honest, at 73 going on 74 years old for Pete. But let's flip over to the defensive conversation here with Patrick Graham, one of my favorite kind of under-the-radar defensive coaches in the league. He just hasn't quite had the right roster talent given to him, whether it was with the Giants several years ago or in his time with the Raiders here. He hasn't really had enough talent to work with where he can have that super successful season, put together a top 3, top 5 defense, playoff success, all of the things that typically need to be seen for a team to want to hire a defensive-minded guy as a head coach. Patrick Graham's name has been floated out there in those discussions, but he hasn't quite been able to reach that level. And I don't know that that's going to happen this year either. We'll talk about the defensive roster talent, obviously, later in the video. But maybe we can eventually get to that point here. But I do think he is someone that has gotten a lot out of lesser talented defenses. Just a couple of years ago in 2023, the Raiders were just inside the top 10 in defensive DVOA. And I want to say it was the 2021 season with the Giants. It could have been 2020, but really had a good defense that year. The way that he had built a really unique hybrid front, like what he was able to unlock in a Leonard Williams, for example, who at the time had a career year. And I think the Seahawks last year looked back to what Patrick Graham was able to do with Leonard Williams in New York and get the best version of Leonard Williams out of him in Seattle last year. He comes ultimately from that Bill Belichick background, which is a defense that over time has constantly evolved and adapted in terms of what sort of fronts you're running and being blitz-heavy teams versus zone-heavy teams versus man-heavy teams. But ultimately what Bill Belichick took pride in and what made him Bill Belichick was the adaptability and catering your defense to your players and their skill sets. And I think Patrick Graham does that very, very well and has continued to do that for this Raiders team. So to get him back when he did interview for the Bengals job, when he was kind of just hovering out there to be hired by anybody as the Raiders completed their head coaching search. They could have lost Patrick Graham, and they didn't. And I think retaining him was a big deal for the Raiders. And with that, the Raiders do have some pretty nice defensive rankings there. They get B grades across the board for me. 13th to 21st for pass defense coaching and 15th to 22nd for run defense coaching. And room for that to go up too, frankly, as Patrick Graham has an opportunity, I think, to continue kind of climbing the ranks of defensive coordinators throughout the league, where there are a lot of really good ones right now in today's landscape of the NFL. But I do want to spend a little more time discussing Patrick Graham and this Raiders defensive scheme. You know, I mentioned it a little bit. Like, yeah, he's kind of got that Belichick background, the idea that this defense could look different any given year. And yes, that has absolutely been true, to the point that we probably don't know necessarily what style of defense, what coverages they're going to lean towards, how often they're going to blitz. All of that stuff could change drastically. And you can especially say that not just because Pete Carroll is coming in and he's got a defensive background and he's always been kind of that rush 4, play cover 3 mindset. Patrick Graham, much more of an aggressive multiple mentality. And last year, for example, the Raiders ran cover 0 more than anybody in the league, Brian Flores included. That's saying a lot. But a part of that too was Patrick Graham had to adapt. Max Crosby wasn't himself. They didn't have a lot of other pass rushers. They had to run a lot of cover 0 to heat up the quarterback. But we have absolutely seen Patrick Graham kind of adapt to who he's got to work with, what sort of personnel he has. And we've seen that here, like just like the Belichick defenses of old. One year they could go from being a 3-4 oriented team to more of a quote unquote 4-3. But with this Raiders team, technically they went from being near the bottom of the league in base defense called in 2023. They called base just 9% of the time. Last year, they jumped up to 5th in the NFL, and their base front, and they had to get into base more because they could not stop the run. So Patrick Graham had to put more bodies at the line. But their base defense was basically a 4-3 under front. With that strong side linebacker that does have kind of that Belichick linebacker influence. And last year for them, it was the combination of Charles Snowden and Kayvon Chason. Chason goes to another Belichick-inspired system, by the way, to the Patriots under Mike Vrabel. So this all ties together. But yeah, having that one extra linebacker down there that can kind of do a little bit of everything, get you some pass rush, get you some run defense, drop them into coverage, use them as, kind of part of the confusion and disguise in your blitzing game as well. So just very much having those Belichickian influences with that role, but also Belichickian in the sense of like, all right, well, Max Crosby wants to put his hand in the dirt and defend the run. Let's let him do that. So they weren't a 3-4 base. They ran kind of that 4-3 over type of front. So just very multiple. Last year, they did kind of simplify things down. They called that base 4-3 to try to stop the run early. And then for the most part, they were either going to drop into cover 3. They were 7th in the NFL in the most cover 3 called, or they were going to heat you up, call cover 0 and get after you. So it wasn't terribly complex with what they were doing last year. But what they did last year was drastically different from what they did in 2023. So trying to predict what they're going to run with a very different personnel here, this could go in a lot of different directions. But ultimately, I think Patrick Graham has shown for the last 4 or 5 years that he can cater his personnel to the scheme and the plays that he's calling. So that is one of the biggest compliments, if not the biggest compliment you can give to a defensive coordinator, and I'm excited to see what this is going to look like this year. Overall, like, this team had some questions heading into the year. Obviously, who was going to be the head coach? What were they going to do at coordinator after they fired Luke Getsy last year and scrambled to kind of plug Scott Turner in? And I think they landed in a really good spot. I really do. It's not the most exciting room. You don't have that 35-year-old offensive guru in here that could give you 20 years of sustainable success necessarily, but this is a really accomplished group. I think everybody is kind of landing in the right role for where they are in their career. And I believe in this staff. Obviously, I'm a little bit higher on this Raiders team overall, and the upgrades they've made with this coaching staff is a good part of that. A big part of that as well is obviously going to be this roster and a lot of the changes they've made there. So we'll get into that. First off, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's video, SeatGeek. You guys, the summer months are here. We're coming out of the MLB All-Star break. Pennant races heating up. The home run derby was just awesome last night, wasn't it? But yeah, go catch a ball game, man, or go pre-order your tickets for an NFL game. Go see the Death Star here with the Raiders. That's definitely at the top of my list for NFL stadiums to get to, or go see a concert. If there's Las Vegas fans watching this, there's always some good music going down in Las Vegas. But whatever entertainment you want, go have some fun, first of all. But when you do it, check out SeatGeek. They are the most trusted ticketing app out there for a reason. They have the best user interface. They color code all of their seats, so you are guaranteed, as long as you look for the green dots, you're going to get the best bang for your buck. SeatGeek always has market competitive prices. You get the tickets right there in your app. You don't have to jump through email chains and try to track down the tickets at the gate. Nope, you know you've got them right there. And right now, if you use code TFG10 when you check out, you will save up to $20 on your next purchase as well. SeatGeek is the best. Thank you to them for being great partners to work with, for sponsoring today's deep dive. That's code TFG10, up to $20 off on your next tickets. Wherever you're headed, have a good time, save a little bit of money, and let's get back to the video. Now it is time to get into this roster. Let's start with the quarterback room, a much upgraded quarterback room with Geno Smith coming in. And I got to say, man, I understand the comments we've gotten saying the Raiders are ranked too high here. I get it. I really do. This team hasn't done a lot of winning in recent years, but something I have seen is an overall disrespect towards Geno Smith and what this addition means. I have seen as much as people saying the Raiders don't have a quarterback, and all the way down to people treating this like it isn't a loss for Seattle. Look, Geno Smith has been a very good quarterback in Seattle for multiple years now, and it's been completely overshadowed by poor play calling in the sense of Ryan Grubb last year, who refused to adapt and got fired because of it. But more importantly, very poor offensive line play. Geno Smith has been getting heated up as much as anybody in the league over the last 2 years, and last year dealt with some of the worst interior pass protection in the entire NFL. And yes, as a result of that, Geno Smith is not a perfect quarterback. He can throw some picks under pressure, and he has had some head-scratching moments in the red zone, especially last year, that really showed up, that got probably overemphasized. But at the end of the day, Geno Smith has been, for the last 2 seasons, a top half of the league starter, and I've got him ranked very close to that coming over here to the Raiders as the 18th overall quarterback, right? Like, you're going to have some other guys, yes, that are projecting higher and ascending, and some other guys that have been hurt that, yeah, maybe you push Geno back to like the 18th QB, but I have him every bit in that tier 3 of good NFL starters that warrant a contract. And as long as you put the right team around a tier 3 quarterback, you're going to give yourself a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. And that is the tier that Geno Smith is in my opinion. I think he does not get enough credit for, first of all, his arm talent, where Geno Smith every bit has right around the top 10 of arm talent in the NFL, not just arm strength where he can really get it out there, but you combine placement and touch, the ability to throw on the run, and just straight up accuracy in the sense of not missing your target. Top 10 is not a stretch for Geno Smith. And in each of the last few seasons, if you put together a highlight reel of the 20 most impressive overall throws that any quarterbacks in the NFL made, Geno Smith's going to find himself in that highlight reel 3, 4, 5 times. Like, he really can put the ball wherever he wants, whenever he wants. He has blown me away in this late career resurgence in that sense. I wasn't as dialed into the draft and watching football in general when Geno came out. And obviously he kind of filtered through the league as a backup after his start with the Jets. I didn't realize just how good of an arm he had until he got a coach and a team that believed in him. That coach was Pete Carroll in Seattle, and he got to show that off, being a really prominent trait for him. Beyond that, he's got really underrated pocket presence. It doesn't always shine through because he hasn't, for the most part, had room to step up in Seattle. But that's another area that he's really surprised me, is his ability to filter through the rush and keep his eyes downfield and extend plays in and out of the pocket, knowing when and how to use his feet to extend plays. He's been awesome at that, and he has the traits to capitalize on it. He's an awesome scrambler, and he's instinctive making throws on the run. Occasionally, yeah, he's going to do a little bit too much. He's going to play some hero ball. It's part of what has prevented him from, earning an extension in Seattle. And although you could argue Seattle should have extended him, but, it's what has held him back, is some of the inconsistent moments from him in tandem with really not having a good O-line in front of him to help him play more consistently. But yeah, he has legit high-end traits at this position, not just physical, but that pocket presence is something that is really valuable for these QBs. And I think he's, generally speaking, got a good, has good processing and decision-making. Is it perfect? No, of course not. Are there some mistakes in there that you can pick apart with him? Yeah, totally. But his 10 years in the NFL very much shows in his ability to make the right reads, go through his progressions, throw with anticipation, run an NFL offense on time. It's certainly good enough with Geno Smith. And I understand that people will use the late career breakout against him, and they view him differently than you would like a young quarterback who's kind of in his fourth year as a starter, which is essentially what we're talking about here with Geno Smith. He is 35 years old, or at least turns 35 in October. And yeah, anytime you have a quarterback that's spent 8 years or whatever bouncing around the league as a backup and struggling out the gate with the New York Jets, because every young quarterback that plays for the Jets does struggle, it is difficult to remove that from the equation on Geno Smith. But if you really just focus on what he's been as a quarterback since winning that job in Seattle and viewing that as in many ways the beginning of his career, if you can do that, and I think you probably should at this point, it becomes pretty damn hard to pick major holes in Geno's game. And you really realize this is a good NFL quarterback that is a massive addition to this Raiders offense from what they had to work with last year. And it's in every category too. Like, more of a vertical passing game, check. A quarterback that can run the offense more efficiently and make better reads, check. Play extension, absolutely check. Design run game aspect, like, you're going to get more with his feet. And with Chip Kelly, who's not afraid to dial up read options, that was something Geno Smith did really well a couple years ago. They got away from it a little bit more last year with him, but they can do some of that stuff that they weren't able to do with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell here last year. So like every single aspect of the quarterback position is upgraded to a relatively large degree here. So this is a major addition. I think just great on the Raiders to be able to get Geno Smith. Like I said earlier, I think he was the best available quarterback for any NFL team to add this given offseason. Contingent, of course, on really what Cam Ward looks like as a rookie. But even then, Cam Ward was only available to one team, and that was the Tennessee Titans. But yes, very optimistic about Geno Smith coming in. I think he is getting disrespected by many, many people out there. And how I feel about Geno is obviously the biggest reason why I have the Raiders 20th, which is in some people's eyes too high, quote unquote. I don't know, man. It's a pretty major upgrade. But now Aiden O'Connell, I think, can officially settle in what I always felt was his destiny. It sounds harsh, but as a backup quarterback in the league, there were some Raiders fans last year that were disappointed that I thought Gardner Minshew was going to be the week 1 starter. And, he's got a bit of a fan base. He's made some nice throws, certainly. He's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, it factor to him. But the traits just aren't there. He doesn't have the arm talent. He doesn't have the play extension ability. He's over-aggressive as a processor. He's very inconsistent in that sense. So as a backup that could have kind of a Nick Folesy type profile, where if he has to come in, maybe he's able to make the right throws for a game and have some good moments, certainly. But for the course of a season, not someone you want. That very much has been solidified here with his time with the Raiders. They did also spend a 6th-round pick on Cam Miller out of North Dakota State. Another guy with very much a NFL backup profile, athletic point guard type out of a smaller program. It feels like there's a few of these guys every year. I felt very similarly about Cam Miller. Can he run a spread style offense and do some stuff with his legs? Theoretically, yeah, he actually could, hold up in a game plan specific approach, but very limited traits. Probably not someone we're talking about with starter upside down the road or anything like that. But yeah, for the Raiders to be sitting here for me with, a tier 3 quarterback ranking 18th in the league, very nice floor situation in my opinion. That is not to beat a dead horse here, but just the biggest of upgrades for this Raiders team. But let's continue through this roster with this group of Raiders weapons who Gino is going to get to throw to this year. Really a fun group, in many ways an underrated group with Jacoby Myers, especially, that I'll talk about. But you got some new bodies in here with Ginty and Jack Besh. You got Brock Bowers coming off his ridiculous rookie season. You've got a lot of different skill sets here and some upside with this group. But I do like this group of Raiders weapons. They come in with a B grade for me. They rank 14th to 17th. And it's a group, too, that is somewhat familiar to what we discussed with the Colts, where the overall style of this team and how these guys' skill sets work together is maybe even better than the sum of its parts. And in many ways, the Raiders are striving to kind of create some form of like those Rack Bros 49ers offenses. The Raiders might not be the offense with the best vertical threats or the best separators at the, receiver position. But they really have 4 guys here that are going to be a complete pain in the ass to deal with, and just might be the most physical group of weapons in the entire league right now. And I would wager will at worst be in the top 3 of missed tackles forced and run after catch. And with the way that they're going to build this offense through the run game and through the quick passing game, it's going to suck having to go against these guys. It really is. And I think you have to start with Brock Bowers in that conversation. What he did as a rookie, honestly, shattering expectations that were already really high. To call him just a tight end is frankly a disservice to this Raiders team and Brock Bowers. Yes, that's what he's going to get listed at here, and it's nice that teams do have to kind of treat him as a tight end, and he can come in and put his hand in the dirt and do some of that stuff. But frankly, he's not that great of an inline blocker. He's best in the blocking game as a slot wide receiver and as a wing player and coming cross formation where he doesn't have to dig out 260-pound defensive ends, because Brock Bowers does play at about 240 pounds. What Brock Bowers really is at the core of it all, and how you should look at him, is Cooper Kupp, frankly. Like, there are so many similarities between play style and talent and skill and production, but more so just like honestly how he is used. Brock Bowers played the majority of his snaps, 412 of his offensive snaps, almost 50% of his snaps as a slot wide receiver, as that big slot. The Rams, in so many ways, going back a few years, used Cooper Kupp as an extension of the tight end group, is that sort of 11 and a half personnel, with 11 personnel being 3 wide receivers, 12 personnel being 2 wide receivers and a tight end, having that hybrid weapon that is a little bit of both. That is Brock Bowers. And then Brock Bowers also played 155 snaps as an outside wide receiver. whether that's using him as an ISO'd player in 3-by-1 formations where you have 3 wide receivers to the trip side and then you put Brock Bowers out there alone and the defense kind of has to decide, like, well, do we tell the offense that we're in man coverage by having a safety or a linebacker follow him out there? Or do we try to have a corner matchup with Brock Bowers? Like, what do we really want to do here? The Raiders are good at that, and I think Chip Kelly will continue to use him in that way. Or he would just straight up line up outside as an outside wide receiver. And honestly, how he is as a route runner, how he attacks the ball down the field, winning back shoulders, like, he can just do a lot of stuff that Cooper Kupp does as an outside wide receiver. So you have to start with Brock Bowers. Yeah, positional listing, he has to come in as a tight end. And he did play about 40% of his snaps as an actual tight end. But the other 60% were as a wide receiver. And it's that understanding of how to use him that allows him to come in his rookie season and dominate with 1,200 yards, with abysmal quarterback play, to be 7th in the NFL in targets. He was tied with Amon-Ra St. Brown in targets last year. Like, that's crazy. So he, to me, really is one of the prominent difference-making weapons in the National Football League. And he is a core reason why the Raiders are essentially inside the top half of the league in my weapons ranking, a league that is loaded with great weaponry. Great start there. But it's not just him. Honestly, Jakobi Meyers is one of the underrated players in the entire NFL. And what I'm about to say, I mean in no form of disrespect to Jackson Smith-Njigba and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but those are two guys that get, obviously, a lot of respect and credit for what they mean to their football teams and the types of weapons that those guys are. If we're going to give those guys that much respect, and I'm not trying to take that away from them, I think they should get that respect. But the fact that they get that much love, and then Jakobi Meyers is over here and nobody talks about him, when he does all of the exact same things that those two guys do, winning in the exact same ways as an intermediate dominator, he catches 64% of his catches over the middle of the field. He is tough as all hell. He's a career 62.8% contested catch ball winner. He was 66.7% last year. You guys, Amon-Ra, again, running the exact same route tree for the most part, 54.9%, which is really good. And last year was at 67.7, like just a tick above Jakobi. Jackson Smith-Njigba has still got to get there. I mean, JSN's at 39% on his career, 46% last year, and it was much better in the second half than it was in the first half last year. But a big reason I'm focusing on that is when you're talking about guys that don't have amazing top speed, that aren't the separators of your typical number one wide receivers, you want them to be reliable with outreached hands and to box guys out. And Jakobi Meyers literally does that as well as anybody in the league. The numbers back that up. Now, that doesn't mean he's like a T. Higgins, Drake London, Mike Evans type where you want to throw him a jump ball on the outside and he's going to win 66% of the time there. Like, there's a difference there in types of contested catches. But in terms of he's just trying to win an angle on a dig route or a slant, he's got to box you out and make a tough catch while covered. Yeah, he's as good as anybody in the league at doing that, and he's done it every year. The worst season he had in contested catch win rate was 2023 at 52.4%. I'm just trying to give this guy some love for that trait that he has, but he's a crafty route runner. He's not small. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. Again, right in that JSN and Amon-Ra St. Brown size profile. And likewise, he can actually step outside and do some stuff. If you want to be in 12 personnel here, you want to have Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer and, do a lot of that heavy personnel stuff. Meyers can absolutely be your outside wide receiver and run some digs, run some comebackers. Doesn't have that vertical field stretching speed for sure. That's a drawback in his game and why, in many cases, he doesn't get a ton of praise because he doesn't have that true speed, but he's a really good wide receiver, and for him to be the number 2 here, which he is, Brock Bowers is the number 1, Jakobi Meyers is the number 2. He is every bit a high-end number 2 wide receiver, 100%. He passed 1,000 yards last year for the first time in his career with horrible QB play. So definitely a fan of Jakobi Meyers, and he as well might be a little bit of a reason why I find myself a bit higher on this Raiders team, but it's continues to be a fun group after that. I want to just kind of gloss over Trey Tucker here. He's fine for what he is. He would be a guy that gives you a little bit more field stretching ability. He's got the 4.3 speed. He's shown the ability to get open deep and make some tough plays down the field. And I think you could even argue that now that he has Geno Smith here, that he could have an opportunity to be more than he's been for this Raiders team. He did show a increase in production last season. I didn't quite put the up arrow on him just for one reason or another, but it's possible that he could get unlocked as kind of this team's Alec Pierce, Marquez Valdes-Scantling type. He can do a little bit more. He's got some route running chops to him too. So I don't want to just throw away Trey Tucker. He's there. He's an adequate wide receiver 3B. The type that if he's the 4th piece in your offense, I think you can be just fine with Trey Tucker. And I think with the Jack Bech pick in the 2nd round, they are hoping that he will be the 3rd wide receiver in this group. Bech has to earn this opportunity, but with where they drafted him and how this room shakes out, I think he will. I will admit the types of routes that he can run and where you line Jack Bech up and just kind of how he wins as a football player is technically redundant with Jakobi Meyers. So depending on the types of route combinations they want to run, what kind of packages they want to be in, it might make more sense for Trey Tucker to be the wide receiver 2. And they certainly have the flexibility to do that. When Meyers and Bech are out there together with Brock Bowers, with another tight end, you're not going to have a lot of field stretching ability, and any smart defense is going to be able to just take their safeties, play single high, collapse down near the line of scrimmage, and that will hurt your run game. It'll put an extra body around the line of scrimmage, which will reduce your run after catch upside and room to operate there. So that's the major criticism of this group if Bech is going to be the true wide receiver 2. But like I said, you do have Trey Tucker there if that becomes a problem. So as long as they're smart about it, you do have a quarterback that can send the deep ball, and Trey Tucker can at least do enough to force you to respect him as a vertical threat. So it's at least there, but it does need to be schemed around a little bit. But I love Jack Bech. I think where they took him is right around where I viewed him, and my pro comp on him was Jawan Jennings. So again, kind of sticking with that Niners rack bros mentality, where Bech is a big wide receiver. He's an extension of your tight end room in so many ways because this guy blocks his ass off. He is really just a dick after the catch. He turns into a power back once he catches the football. He will stiff arm you, he will truck you, and he has the strength to deliver that. So if you've got an undersized slot corner or a skinny outside corner trying to bring him down, good luck. It's going to suck trying to do that. I would say he even brings more physicality after the catch than Jakobi Meyers does in theory. But likewise, he's a good route runner on digs and slants and hitches, just like Meyers. He's going to box you out at the catch point. He's going to win tough catches. Is he someone that's going to line up outside and burn past a corner or pull away on a crossing route and provide a speed element to your weapons? No, not necessarily. But with the mentality that they're going with here, I think he plugs right in. It continues to build a strength upon a strength. You already have tough receivers in Brock Bowers and Ginty, who they took, and Jakobi Meyers is tough. And then you add Jack Bech to that. It is similar to me like the Niners, who already had George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. And then they said, okay, try to deal with Jawan Jennings as well. And that little extra needle mover can really set teams over the edge. So they have a mentality that they are going for with this team. And like I said in the cold open, playing against this team is going to effing suck. Besh is a part of that. And then you got Ashton Jinty, who you do have to already project him as one of the difference-making receiving backs in the NFL. You know, Boise got away from throwing him the ball a little bit more in his final season, but you go back to 2022, there were a lot of Alvin Kamara comps for his route running and what he would do catching dump downs. And he is going to be one of the hardest players in the NFL to stop from converting an underneath target on third down. So Geno, when he does get in a pinch, is going to be able to find Jinty underneath and say, hey, go make that slot corner miss. And Ashton Jinty wrote the letter to the NFL. Hey, in a game all about tackling, I'm the guy you can't tackle. So yeah, on dump downs and in the screen game, he absolutely is going to be a factor here. I think he gets 65, 70 receptions here, 400 or 500 yards at least, and is a real piece for this group of weapons, which those following the series, there's not a ton of backs that I really consider kind of elevating the group of weapons. I already imagine that Ashton Jinty is going to be a big part of that. We got to see it in practice, but with how Chip Kelly used Travion Henderson in the receiving game last year, knowing Jinty can handle it, I fully anticipate that that's going to happen. And that really rounds out your core group of 5 starters here, but there are definitely some other guys that can get in the mix here. I think the next guy that is going to be worth talking about here is Michael Mayer. He is probably the biggest wild card piece for this offense in terms of we don't really know what we're going to get, where it could be nothing, or he could actually be like a legit contributor that possibly helps this group of weapons elevate above the current ranking. Like outside of Michael Mayer, like Jack Besh is probably the other guy that, depending on what he can give you in his rookie season, would be the other piece that could help get this group of Raiders weapons into the top 10. But as we mentioned, Brock Bowers is not a tight end for the most part. 40% of the time he's going to be at tight end. The other 60, he's a wide receiver for this team. Michael Mayer, in theory, would be the other starter. And he did play last year, but he dealt with some very serious mental health issues. And really the only hope here is that they can get him the right treatment, whether it's the right people around him or the right medication. It's a real deal. And there are experts out there that know how to help people get through mental health issues, whatever it is that is plaguing Michael Mayer right now. And maybe being in a Raiders locker room that is better vibes with Pete Carroll, and having maybe a coach like Pete Carroll that understands people and understands the human element of this game. I think that's potentially great for Michael Mayer. So there is hope, I think, that Mayer can get back on the field and be himself, because when he's himself, he was a very exciting, real tight end prospect that if Mayer can be the best version of himself, which I think is something like a Hunter Henry, for example, as a true possession tight end who's good after the catch, a good blocker, not the best athlete necessarily, but he was in some first round conversations. He ends up going high second for the Raiders. Obviously he hasn't been able to be that type of player to this point in his career, but if he can be that guy, you're allowing Brock Bowers to be the best version of himself. You're allowing this offense to really tap into what they want to do at their best, to be a 12 personnel team and just absolutely suck to go against. I mean, you come out with Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, Jack Besh, Jacoby Myers, and Ashton Jinty. It is hard to imagine a tougher group of 5 eligible weapons that are harder to tackle than that group. And just for the run game itself, like I said, Bowers can't really dig out a defensive end. Michael Mayer can. And actually last year, he did grade out better as a run blocker for what it's worth. It's just he wasn't really involved in the passing game a whole lot. But yeah, he's a huge wild card. He really is. I would love to see him get back out there for all the reasons we just detailed. But there's also a world where, unfortunately, he's struggling. And it's hard to say if that means he gets traded or if he is out there playing and just isn't much of a difference maker, or if he kind of gets benched, or maybe that's not the best word for it. Maybe he just isn't out there as much, and that's where Ian Thomas gets some playing time. Like it just could really go in any given direction here, and I'm hoping for the best for everybody's sake who's involved here. But if you can't get Michael Mayer out there, Ian Thomas would have to play a lot of tight end here, and he's done it. That's about the nicest thing you can say about Ian Thomas. The nice thing is you don't have to throw him the football a whole lot because you got all these other options. He can at least try as a blocker. He's got some strength. I guess there's worse players to play in that role, but there's not, there's a lot of other better ones too than Ian Thomas. But again, if Mayer's not there, Thomas would be in many ways a starter for this team because they're not going to just take Brock Bowers and make him a full-time tight end. That would be silly. And Chip Kelly's smarter than that. But then I think you circle back to the wide receiver depth. There's a few interesting names here. So Deontay Thornton in the 4th round, I think is a fun pick. And as we mentioned, with Myers and Besh, they don't have the field stretching ability. Well, that's exactly why you draft Deontay Thornton, who is 6'5", runs a legit 4.3, and showed at Tennessee he can take the top off the defense, and he even made some really impressive catches deep down the field. He's a true one-trick pony. These guys have a horrible hit rate of just taking these one-track speed guys with limited production in college. These guys just have a horrible hit rate, but some of them do hit. And if he can be something like this team's Marquez Valdez-Scantling, that would be a win in the 4th round. MVS has his frustrations, but he certainly, going back in time, you would draft him in the 4th round every day of the week. And I think they will get him some designed looks. He's going to have to, I think, show some flashes in practice to earn those reps, but I think he can do that. Because again, Trey Tucker has some speed. He can take the top off, but it's not what Deontay Thornton has. And if Thornton can hit, it feels so unlikely given the hit rate with these types. And he's so far away from it for 2025 coming out of that Tennessee offense that it's not really football with how they spread things out and design things. It feels like he's so far away from being a real impact player as a rookie that it's hard to say he's a real wild card for this team, if that makes sense. But theoretically speaking, if he becomes the wide receiver 4 in time, that would be amazing. And certainly him at his best would be enough that defenses can't do what we said and just collapse the box and change the numbers, not having to respect the deep ball. So there's certainly a room and an opportunity for Thornton to emerge here. It's just, can he do it? Can he hit the jugs machine? Can he improve his release enough to be a vertical threat in the NFL? It was always going to be a question for him, but the landing spot is fantastic with that opportunity in the role. And then Colin Johnson, basically, he's a big-bodied possession, ex-wide receiver on the outside, who has never really stunk when he's gotten opportunities in the NFL. He's a limited athlete and is never going to be this great starter or anything. But can he surprise here in an opportunity where they don't really have that perimeter receiver, especially a bigger-bodied guy? There's an opportunity there for Colin Johnson to maybe have a surprise season and maybe become something like a, let's say, Josh Reynolds type for this Raiders offense. For those familiar with his game, I could see it. I don't need to spend any more time on it than that, but it could happen here. And then they take Tommy Mellott in the 6th round, who we literally have no idea. He played college quarterback, but is a freaky athlete and is going to go the Julian Edelman route and try to learn slot wide receiver. So it's, we're probably not going to see too much of him this year, but why not take a fun dart throw like that late in the draft? And then the only other guy I want to just at least mention real quick is Kyle Phillips, who, again, when he's played, he's been good for the Titans, but has had just prolific injury issues coming out of college. So if he's healthy, maybe he can start to climb the ladder here, and that's all I'm going to really say about him. That's really it. I mean, you got some RB depth in Raheem Mostert, Sincere McCormick, not really too much worth spending time on there. I mean, Dylan Laub was fascinating coming out of college, out of New Hampshire. He would technically provide a little route running prowess and stuff if Ginty needed a breather. But yeah, that's your group of weapons. It's a really fun unit. I love the complementary group of skill sets. You've obviously got some questions there with Besh in his rookie year, Deontay Thornton, Michael Mayer. Those would be your outlets for this to maybe even be a top 10 group of weapons. But I think the floor is also just really, really nice with this unit. They have a core identity. They know what they want to do. They know how they're going to use these guys. And that gives this group a lot to work with. And how they want to use those guys piggybacks off of this run game so nicely. Let's transition there to this backfield with Ashton Ginty. Like, I just keep coming back to that letter that he wrote to the NFL. And it was the Raiders having this identity, knowing exactly what they wanted to be with Pete Carroll, kind of that sort of kneecap biting mentality. Obviously, it's a Lions thing, but it's the same concept here of like, okay, we might not be the best team in the NFL, but we want it to suck to play us. And drafting Ashton Ginty is the definition of that. This guy is toughness and contact balance personified. His ability to absorb contact from his lower half and redistribute contact with his arms, with stiff arms, or even like lowering a shoulder into you, and the power he has from his core, it's unbelievable, man. And it's a testament to his work ethic. Like, yeah, he puts in the time to have good vision and skill at the RB position, but from a just pure bodybuilding, weightlifting, like putting work into his body perspective, unbelievable. This guy is a true gym rat and an absolute freak in terms of how much strength this guy has pound for pound. And him being at the heart of the identity of this offense, I'm stoked, man. And I do already have the Raiders with Ashton Ginty as the 6th highest ranked running back room in the league. And the arrow is really only pointing up on that. If we look back on this season and we say Ashton Ginty is the best running back in the NFL, is that really going to surprise any of you based on the level of prospect that this guy was? And the fact that we know that RBs have a very high floor out the gate. More often than not, these superstar running backs coming out of college, their game translates immediately. Like, yes, there is an aspect of, okay, he's a rookie, and before I say he's a top 3 running back in the NFL, I need to see it first. But compared to a lot of other position groups, like a Jack Besh, who we talked about, or some of these young quarterbacks where, yeah, I do need to see it a little bit more. I need to see that game translate from what we knew about them in college. At the running back position, I am so much more prepared to come out and just say, yeah, I fully anticipate Ashton Ginty is going to be an absolute demon in the NFL. So great pick. Love the addition here. And again, you now go from arguably the worst running back room in the league, where last year's Zamir White was a train wreck, to the point that Sincere McCormick got out there and showed some interesting stuff late in the season, but still nothing crazy. You go from that to top 10 out the gate with Ashton Ginty, with the upside of being the best running back in the NFL as early as his rookie season, as we have seen from rookie running backs in years past. Now, he's got some pretty damn good names out there to pass up. You know, you kind of need Saquon to fall off from what he did last year, Derrick Henry to not be Derrick Henry. There's obviously some supreme talents at this position right now, but we do see the crown get passed off almost every single year. And could that crown get passed to Ashton Ginty? I think it's possible. So, yeah, I mean, he really is this entire backfield. I think he's going to get absolutely fed. You don't really draft a guy that high with the approach that this team is going to have to not give him the football. So if we're talking fantasy football, give me all of the Ashton Ginty, essentially. Not to take away what these other top backs are going to be capable of this year either. But yeah, I think a top 5 fantasy football finish for Ashton Jeanty, especially when you consider what he's going to do in the receiving game. I think that's absolutely reasonable. I know he's getting drafted in that range, but I agree with it. So yeah, I think we've probably run out of good things to say about Ashton Jeanty. There's more in there to say. You can go back to the RB rankings video if you want even more about Ashton Jeanty, but the utmost optimism for him coming in with this backfield. As far as the backups, they did sign Raheem Mostert. He's going to come down to health. He's 33 years old. He's had a history of injuries in his career. Hard to expect too much from him, but just a year ago in 2023, Mostert was at 31 years old, one of the most efficient backs in the league. If you get that version back from him, hell yeah. Like, to have a nice compliment with his speed and toughness, like, to Ashton Jeanty, and in a world where Mostert might only get 4 or 5 touches a game, maybe that does help him kind of be the best version of himself. Maybe I'm talking myself into Mostert being more of an impact here as we talk, but it is a reminder, like, yeah, he's 33 years old and has been banged up. That 1 year in 2023 was kind of an outlier in the sense of his ability to stay healthy. So we'll see. Upside is technically there for him to be a good backup, but you do have Sincere McCormick, who he had to start late in the season last year, and he showed some promise. It wasn't enough for them to feel great about him. Obviously, I mean, they go and add both of these guys ahead of him to this room. But as an RB3, I think McCormick has a lot of traits to like. Zamir White's probably on the fringe of making this team at this point, especially because Dylan Laub would be more of the receiving option if you weren't going to Ashton Jeanty. So wouldn't be stunned if Zamir White ends up elsewhere after this year. But yeah, it's a solid group of running back depth. And then we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the Raiders do have a nice little cherry on top with this run game with the impact from Geno Smith and his legs. I absolutely imagine that they will utilize him. Even in Seattle last year, he was 15th in designed rushes for QBs, but you go back to 2023 and the Seahawks actually did some really good stuff with Geno in the design run game where he showed some impressive flashes as like a top 10 designed rushing threat among QBs that 2023 season. So we're a year removed from that. He's now 35 years old. So I don't think it's going to be anything crazy, but I do think Chip Kelly wants that to be a part of his design run game. We saw a little bit of that with Will Howard last year. Just once or twice a game, whether it's just a straight up read option where you need to force that backside end to stay honest against inside zone out of shotgun, or doing some other stuff. You can do QB power with Geno. Not that he needs to be a power threat, but you can get him through the C gap with a little bit of juice and a lead blocker. Like, he can actually be a weapon if they want to use him there. So it's nothing crazy, but a nice little cherry on top for this run game. And then, like, I unironically put JJ Pegues in there as well. Totally messing around, giving him an elite grade on the graphic there for the QB run game. But JJ Pegues might play a role in the run game in some sense, whether it's coming in as a lead blocker or actually stepping in as a goal line QB. JJ Pegues is a defensive end that they drafted this year. He had 7 touchdowns as a Wildcat QB for Ole Miss last year, and he was actually good at it, like unironically good as a short yardage threat. So if they want to do it, they can. Is he an elite impact in the run game? No, that's more of a joke. But could it be like an actual asset? Yes, if they wanted to tap into it. So we'll keep an eye on that there. But let's move on and talk about the offensive line here. This is the biggest wild card overall as a total unit for this offense, for sure. It's a solid group. I right now have them ranked 20th, 15th to 22nd in pass blocking, and 20th to 22nd in run blocking. C+ grades across the board. I think this is a solid unit, obviously, but they're a wild card in the sense that there's a lot of youth here and a lot of upside, and there is room for this to be something closer to a top 10 offensive line. And if they hit some green lights here and a few things really go right, this offense will be a serious problem, because not only will they be maybe the hardest group of playmakers to tackle, now with a quarterback that can get them the ball and a running back like Ashton Ginty, but if they're actually moving you off the ball and buying Geno some time in the passing game, and this isn't just some like out there theoretical thing, like there is real talent here for them to be able to do that. This offense could actually be pretty damn good, you guys. And I know it's the Raiders, and it's hard to imagine that happening, but seriously, this group could be the skeleton key that can get that done. So let's go through it. At left tackle, you got Colton Miller. Very little to say about Colton Miller. He's a rock. He's one of the better pass protecting left tackles in the NFL. He has made big gains as a run blocker as well. He's athletic. He's tough. He's got the length. You love Colton Miller. And you love that, there was some discussion before the draft that maybe he was a trade candidate because he wants a new contract here as they sort things out with this group. At this point in time, it seems like he's going to be there, and good on the Raiders for doing that, assuming we get to the start of the season and they don't move Colton Miller. With my luck, I'll post this deep dive and he's going to get traded tomorrow. But for now, very much anticipating he is here. You can hang your hat on him as a franchise left tackle, and hopefully they get a contract extension done with him. Core building block, right? His presence is a big reason why you feel like there is room for this to maybe sniff being a top 10 offensive line. But really, as you go from left to right, for the most part, the questions stack up. At left guard, at least projected right now at left guard, Dylan Parham. It's not guaranteed. Parham could play right guard. There's a bit of a kind of position battle / they're sorting through the best combination here. Parham played his best season at right guard last year. Right now, he's listed on the Our Lads depth chart at left guard, but you can do some mental gymnastics and imagine him at right guard potentially, but right now we'll go off of kind of what they're seeing in camp, and Our Lads is usually pretty good about who's projected to be the starter at certain spots, and I think that's the case here with Parham at left guard for now. But overall, whether it's at left guard or right guard, you have a very good overall player, better in the run game because he's such a good athlete and he's got the mentality for it. He's a smaller guy, so he struggles at times in his anchor in pass protection, but he's improved his technique. He's gotten better every single year. You could argue heading into a contract year, he should actually have the up arrow on him. I don't want to just put the green up arrow on everybody, but he very well could even be better than how we perceive him right now. But his floor is really nice as an overall player, and you're not really worried about him being one of your starters. So that's nice. At center, you have JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, who is one of the highest upside, exciting young centers in the league. He played a little guard, played a little center in his rookie season because Andre James was here last year. He's going to step in and be their full-time starter. There is a lot of reason to be excited about him. He is a dickhead in the run game. He's got a great anchor. He was an awesome prospect, had some injury concerns coming out that dropped him into the second round, but every bit a first-round talent at the center position, which don't come around every year. Like, seriously, he had a promising rookie season. He was overall a good player. We can't come out and rank him as a star player quite yet. He hasn't proved it, but the arrow is absolutely skyrocketing up on him. He could be a top 3 center in the NFL this year. Frank Ragnow retired. Creed Humphrey gets that crown by default. But after Creed, you got Linderbaum in Baltimore. There's a few other candidates in there, but even Linderbaum is athletic and as good as he is. He doesn't have the size, the play strength, and the overall balance of a JPJ. There is a lot of Creed Humphrey and Frank Ragnow in Jackson Powers Johnson. So big year 2 for him. If he reaches his upside, which there's not really a reason to believe he can't, that's obviously really exciting for what that could mean for this offensive line. Then at right guard, look, they gave Alex Kappa 2 years, $11 million, and right now he's listed as the starter over Jordan Meredith, who had kind of a year 3 out of nowhere breakout. It's one of these deals where I don't like it. I don't really understand it. sometimes these moves do work out. It reminds me a little bit of like the Bucks last year where they were listing Ben Bredeson as the guard, and I didn't really get that because I felt like Robert Hainsey was more promising at that point, and kind of worked out where Ben Bredeson ended up playing better in New Horizons, and hey, Robert Hainsey just got a starting contract with the Jags too. So I wasn't totally crazy, but sometimes these teams do see something or they know something that we don't. And Kappa, like, dude, he had a horrible year for the Bengals last year. He did. He was a turnstile in pass protection. They really struggled to run block when they needed to run block in Cincinnati, and they rightfully so move on from him. And the Raiders give him some money. They're hoping he can get back to like what he did in previous seasons. He's only 30 years old. He's had good years as a starter just a couple years ago. So like, you know, there's a good player in there somewhere. It's on the Raiders to get that out of him. Fortunately, and a reason that you don't need to panic about seeing that kind of replacement level color coding on the graphic here. While he's currently listed as the starter, you can be pretty damn optimistic that they're going to get better play than we're currently listing, because if Kappa struggles, they can go to Jordan Meredith, who looked really nice last year. Undrafted player, year 3, just kind of had a diamond in the rough breakthrough. Did some good stuff in the run game for an offensive line that certainly had its ups and downs. I think Andre James was probably the core issue there, on top of just a lot of moving pieces and communication issues that they're hoping can be cleared up a little bit here. But he was second in pass blocking efficiency among guards last year, which is just it's a big name, but it's just pressures per pass blocking snap is pass blocking efficiency. He was second in the NFL there in 9 games played. You know, PFF grades aren't perfect, and you can nitpick some plays where, you know, you can disagree with the grades and stuff, but for the most part, they're pretty solid, especially on the offensive line. And Jordan Meredith was the 5th highest graded guard in football last year. Granted, not playing a full season like most guys, but 9th in run block grade and 11th in pass block grade. Like, he just had a really balanced overall season out of nowhere. He comes out of Western Kentucky. He's 6'3", 300 pounds. Maybe doesn't check all of the typical physical boxes, but the Raiders are probably right to at least be skeptical of what happened. It's just not very often that a guy with his profile breaks through and becomes a full-on starter. It can happen, though. And it's not like giving Alex Kappa 2 years, $11 million is so much that if Meredith does look legit in camp, they can't just make Kappa a swing player on the interior, a backup, a really nice backup, and then let Meredith break through. And if Meredith can win this job, like, that's great. He's got upside himself. If he can sustain the rough estimate that a PFF grade might be on him, where he's maybe a top, let's just play it safe and say a top 20 guard in the league. Okay, we already said what you have in JPJ. You put Meredith next to that. Parham's fine. Colton Miller's a franchise left tackle. Like, you're cooking with gas, right? So yes, you have some concerns with Kappa, but it's a hedged bet, if you will. And then we didn't even mention Caleb Rogers. We'll get there. 3rd round pick at guard there. That's just another good dart throw to hedge the hedge, if you will. So, like, ultimately, I feel pretty damn good that right guard's going to sort its way out. But then you got right tackle. This is probably the biggest question mark. Like I said, I think right guard will figure itself out. Right tackle is the one spot that could be more of an issue for this team, in my opinion. Not guaranteed to happen, though, because DJ Glaze stepped in as a 3rd round rookie, someone that I did like. I like DJ Glaze's tape out of Maryland. I was higher on him than the consensus board, and I like this pick for the Raiders. I thought he really passed the eye test in terms of physical traits and a lot to work with in terms of athleticism and it looking really pretty when he did win at Maryland. And for a third round rookie tackle, he shattered expectations. Was he perfect? No. And he absolutely had some ups and downs, as you would expect. But he ends up starting almost every single game at right tackle last year, almost 1,000 snaps. And again, a lot of promise. Streaky, you're not locking him in as the starter of the future, but it was certainly enough for them to essentially not replace him. But they did hedge their bet with Charles Grant, who I kind of want to talk hand in hand with DJ Glaze, because both these guys are just unproven, but both guys do have the physical traits. DJ Glaze is 6'5", 330. Charles Grant, who played his college ball at William Mary, someone with a wrestling background, obviously under-recruited, going to William and Mary, but kind of newer to football and certainly is going to be new to high-level football, jumping from William and Mary to the NFL, but moves really well, a polished athlete. You love that wrestling background. It seems to work out more often than not for these guys. Getting him now with NFL coaching, and I want to say he was a Duke Manyweather guy who's done a great job with players like him that just need the right coaching and the right technique. So like between Glaze and Grant, you have some very fascinating dart throws and a better than not chance that one of these guys can become a franchise right tackle for you. And that's pretty high praise though. But like, again, between Glaze and Grant, I would say there's a 60 to 65% chance that one of these guys hits. Does that mean they hit in week one, or that you don't have some learning curves, or that it doesn't take some time finding out maybe that one guy can't play? You have some bad games and then you have to go to Charles Grant, for example. Like that could absolutely happen. But long term, I like the dart throws they've made here. It's just going to come down to development of these guys. You do have Thayer Munford, who has started a decent handful of games there in a tragic situation where Glaze and Grant both really suck. You know, Thayer Munford can technically step in and move some guys in the run game, and he's got some experience where you technically could do worse as a backup tackle, but you would certainly see some losses and be looking for another option in the future if that happens. And then, yeah, I mean, Caleb Rogers as well is kind of the last offensive line piece worth talking about here. Third round pick as well, right after Charles Grant. And he was a decent dart throw in the third round. He went a little bit earlier than I expected because I did think his tape was streaky. He moved all over the offensive line, which I think is a good thing that he's got that experience, but it prevented his ability to really lock in and have like a big year at any given point. He's tough. I think this is ultimately probably a gamble on the shuttle testing number for him. He had the best 20-yard shuttle number out of any interior offensive lineman in the class at 4.49, and there's kind of a legendary cheat code in scouting circles right now where if you hit a 4.45 20-yard shuttle on the interior of the offense, or I think it's just any offensive lineman, those guys have like an 80% likelihood of starting games in the NFL. And Caleb Rogers was, again, the best in the class and just outside that 4.45 number. So I think it's probably more of a dart throw on that. But there was some stuff to like about him. So again, just another hedge to the hedge, really, is what he is. And I think that's probably your 9 on the offensive line. There might be room for one of these other guys to surprise in camp and get a 10th roster spot for the offensive lineman. But I do like this offensive line. I'm generally optimistic about it. You've got some question marks and some young guys that still have to prove it. But like I said, I think there is top 10 upside for this offensive line. There's shit, man. Like, if everything goes right, eventually this could be a top 10 offensive line. Like if JPJ becomes a top 3 center, I think if Jordan Meredith wins that job and looks like he did last year, and DJ Glaze especially like really locks in and hits his theoretical upside, like that's a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. If all those things happen, it's a 5% chance, if not less, that all those things do happen, but it's a possibility. But that rounds out your Raiders offense. It is, to me, a very fun unit, and they come in as our 20th ranked offense in the league. 13th in run game, 21st in passing game, just really solid, really tough, not perfect, but there's even upside for this to be better than this 20th ranking, especially with that offensive line, but some of the question marks with the wide receiver groups as well. You know, Ashton Ginty, we have a very nice rating on as our 6th RB, but if he can prove that he's just the best back in the NFL, that would also help as well. So, like, there is actually upside with this group to be more of a top 10 offense in the league. I think that's probably the core of, like, kind of what gets me excited about this Raiders team. Like, I think if you ask around, most people would say, yeah, the Raiders can't be a top 10 offense. I don't think that's crazy in theory. They gotta get some stuff to go right, but I am excited to see this group. Let's now flip over to the defensive side of things. This is where we have a lot more questions, but there is some stuff to work with for sure. And that's going to start on the defensive line. And as we've seen in years past, like going back to 2023, as long as you have a healthy Max Crosby, like, you're gonna get an impact from the defensive line. But I did put that wild card icon up there with this unit, and they are one of the harder groups to rank, certainly for this Raiders team, but really throughout the league. Like, this group right here, specifically what they're able to get from Christian Wilkins and Malcolm Kuntz and their injury-related situations, what they're able to get from those guys can in many ways make or break this Raiders team's season. So trying to filter through that dialogue, I do have the Raiders as the 9th overall defensive line right now, 6th to 11th in pass rush, and 11th to 16th in D-line run defense. But it is a polarizing group and a polarizing discussion. Let's start with Max Crosby real quick. I mean, dude, he is a tier 1 elite edge rusher. I think you throw last season out, the guy played through a high ankle sprain at a position that is so dependent on your ankles and the burst from your lower half and bend, which is all a big part of what makes Max Crosby an elite edge rusher. He doesn't quite have elite bend, but he's got more than enough, and he especially has a great first step, and it wasn't there. He wasn't able to rush with the same power, that ability to get off the ball, convert speed to power, which at the end of the day, Max Crosby has an awesome bull rush, and then he has the entire other bag of pass rush moves with cross chops and swipes and spin moves that once you're afraid of his power, he will kill you in every other way imaginable for a pass rusher. He wasn't able to tap all that nearly as efficiently as we're used to with Max Crosby. I fully expect we get that back. It's not some serious injury that he can't recover from. He's got unbelievable work ethic to get his body back in shape, and if not into even the best shape of his life, he's not even 28 years old yet. Like, he is still very much in his physical prime, and he's going to be back to blowing up offensive game plans as we've seen him do in years past. And anytime you have a guy in this tier where there's only, honestly, like, you can almost count them on one hand. I mean, with the edge rushers, you literally can, on one hand, count the guys that are as good as Max, or at least in the tier here with Max Crosby. So you got Crosby, you got Myles Garrett, you got Micah Parsons, you got Nick Bosa, and I would argue we can now trade TJ Watt for Aiden Hutchinson in this tier based on what Hutchinson did in the first 5 weeks before injury last year. We'll see where those guys kind of land with their respective career arcs. Maybe they're 6 if TJ Watt can get back to his old self. But that's it. And then there's one interior player, Chris Jones, that and maybe Dexter Lawrence from a overall game perspective, but that's more of a run defense plus pass rushing perspective conversation. So, like, let's say 6 to 8 players in the NFL can impact a game like Max Crosby can. That's going to get you somewhere no matter what happens. So I have the utmost respect for him and his return, and I really do think a lot of people sleep on because he was playing, it wasn't Max Crosby last year. But there's so much reason to believe that guy's back. I think so many people sleep on that aspect being missing from this Raiders team, whereas in 2023, his impact alone almost solely made them a top 10 defense in the NFL that year, with some good coaching as well from our guy Patrick Graham. But yeah, you get that piece back. That's a huge deal. But you do have some question marks here. Like, let's go to Christian Wilkins, who was brought in here to be the Robin to Max Crosby's Batman. And he played 5 games, and Crosby wasn't himself. And then Wilkins gets hurt 4.5 games into this thing. He breaks his toe and misses the rest of the season. And it was just like, okay, well, that's gone. Like, the idea that this was supposed to be the identity of this entire team, was supposed to be the Crosby-Wilkins duo. And they didn't get either of that. So, like I kind of said earlier in the video, 2 weeks ago, we thought Christian Wilkins was going to have plenty of time. He had surgery on the toe. He was going to be back. Well, he posted an Instagram photo with him in a walking boot, and all of a sudden the football world is in panic that he had to have another surgery, that he had a setback, and potentially is going to like miss the season, is like the panic button mode on Christian Wilkins right now. And I understand, like, that's a narrative that's out there right now that could surface for this team that would hurt this overall power ranking for this team. When I put these ratings together in May, which is what I do, I was fully anticipating a healthy Christian Wilkins making his return to this team. There's now questions on if that's going to happen. Now, I've looked into it, and most of the medical experts are saying it's concerning. It could keep him out of camp if he had to kind of go back in and have surgery. But even if that's the case, like, basically, I'm not a doctor, but my understanding is about 20% of the time you could have a setback like this around this timeline where you got to go in and repair it again. And then you're talking about another couple of months. But even then, it's like that would still put Wilkins on a timeline that he's available this year. The fear is the kind of lack of information surrounding this, and that it could be something beyond the broken toe that we don't know about. So it is just up in the air if Christian Wilkins is even going to be there this year. I think there's still cautious optimism that he is, and he's going to be there week 1, but just the utmost of wild cards, right? And if we look back on this at the end of the year, and it was Max Crosby, and we'll talk about Malcolm Kuntz and his return being exciting too, but, you know, if we look back on the year and it's like, yeah, this ranking was kind of stupid, there's your context. It's not going to matter in a year from now when people are saying this all aged like milk, but I'm giving you the context nonetheless. Now, let's talk about Christian Wilkins. I mean, signing him, that was the bee's knees, man. I am still excited about the potential of seeing these two guys out there together. Just one of the best overall run defenders at the position in the league, full stop. That is where he makes his biggest impact, is his ability to help this Raiders team get to third down so that Max Crosby can kill you. He is quite possibly the best block shedder in the NFL. Just the pure evaluation of, can he get off the ball, stack his hands inside, have enough foot quickness to slip off of blocks, but also the raw arm strength to just throw you to the side, get off a block, make a play in the hole. Like, I think he gets the crown for that individual trait, at least for interior defensive linemen. He's not the biggest guy, but he can anchor okay. And he's just a huge asset in the run game if he's out there. And then as a pass rusher, he's all right. He's probably more of a 3 as a pass rusher, but overall he's a good number 2 because he's so good as a run defender, if that makes sense. But yeah, he can win in a different variety of ways as a rusher. He's like a 35 to 40 pressure, 5 or 6 sack guy. So it's a nice piece for your pass rush, just not like this dynamic impact. So getting him back there would be huge, needless to say. I want to step back outside of the edge group, though, because Malcolm Kuntz, getting him back to this team, is also a super underrated addition for this team that I think people sleep on when they say the Raiders are too high. Look, Malcolm Kuntz was probably the next biggest reason why this was actually a top 10 defense in 2023. Number one was Max Crosby. Number two was really good coaching from Patrick Graham. And then Malcolm Kuntz being really out of nowhere a legit number two rusher. Like, he's got to play at that level again and prove that he is that caliber of a player, projectable year to year, for example. But in that individual 2023 season, his breakout year, the third year of his rookie deal, he had 52 pressures, 8 sacks. He won with power. He ran with won with speed and bend around the outside. He was a threat on inside moves. He was the complete package. This was a real deal breakout that he was heading into the fourth year of his rookie deal last year. Like, okay, this guy could break through as, let's compare it to like Josh Sweat, for example, a guy that, if you're putting him opposite of Max Crosby, like, he can legit impact games getting one-on-one blocks all the time. So it was a breakout year. He's coming off the ACL injury. He gets that up and down yellow arrow for me. There's no guarantee he can repeat that performance or get back into that shape a year from the ACL. That's going to be a question mark, but he's had plenty of time to recover. He's got about 12 months removed from this thing because it was a preseason injury. So plenty of time to recover and motivated. He's got a 1-year deal, but I love giving him that 1-year deal so that he comes in motivated and with an opportunity to get a huge deal, hopefully with this Raiders team. I mean, you guys, if he is what he was just in 2023, let alone the fact that he could theoretically get better, because that was a dramatic leap from his second year. If Christian Wilkins is healthy and we expect Max Crosby to be that guy, this no joke could be a top 3 defensive line in the NFL this year. And it's hard to not be a good defense when you're getting that type of an impact up front. But you obviously just have huge questions there from Kuntz and Wilkins. And that's how we end up with them as the 9th overall defensive line, where they could be better than that. They could also be worse than that, frankly. So it's all about those 3 guys. They have some other pieces. You know, Adam Butler kind of is what he is. We know what Adam Butler is. He's got to be, God, is he pushing 33, 34 years old? He's actually younger than that. He just turned 31, which is a little bit surprising to me. But he's a capable pass rusher. As I mentioned, he is quietly like sneaky dropping into coverage. He's got like instincts, so they'll do some fun stuff with him on pass rush downs. He had to step in and play a lot of run defense last year. Honestly, he might have to do that again this year. It's not ideal. He is a ding to their run defense grade. He's a smaller guy, 6'4", 300. It's just not his game. He's more of a quick twitch interior piece. So we know what he is, but they did bring him back, and he's a useful kind of rotational piece that has to be more of a starter for them. You need these other 3 guys to be the best versions of themselves if you can feel okay about Adam Butler as an actual starter. But that said, Tyree Wilson is also in the mix here. Tyree Wilson's going to play a little bit of some 4-eye, a little interior, a little edge. He's kind of this hybrid defensive end. They use him very much like Patrick Graham used Leonard Williams back with the Giants. And while he was a huge disappointment in his rookie season, battled through some injuries that year, and is very much not looking like he's going to return value on being the 6th overall pick, they did find a way to use him and tap into his skill set. And we'll see, like, maybe the arrow should be pointing up on him in year 3. If it is, that's great. I'm certainly not counting on that. I think in this bit of a tweener role, there is just, kind of a limited upside in that sense. And I don't think he is Leonard Williams. He doesn't have the size profile of Leonard Williams, for example, to be more of a 3-down defensive tackle type. He is much more of a true tweener, if that makes sense. So it's not a full-on comp, but in terms of usage, that's where they've been sticking him. But he's not a lost cause, and that's a nice thing to say about Tyree Wilson, based on the lack of buzz coming out of his draft status. Then you get into your true rotation. I mean, Charles Snowden did do some fun stuff. He's a hyper lengthy early down Sam linebacker. He's the reason they were okay letting Caleb Monchason go. Snowden does play think of Andrew Van Ginkel's role, where you kind of do a little bit of everything with him. That's kind of his skill set. He's a fun, interesting piece. He's worth a shout out. Not an impact player, but he allows them to do some of the stuff they want to do schematically speaking. Then you got some projects. Andre Carter, a fun project coming out of Navy. Ja Joyner had a little bit of buzz. Undrafted rookie out of Minnesota. But that's kind of your defensive end group. Again, it's mostly just scheme-specific rotational players there with Tyree Wilson and Charles Snowden, where Wilson's more of a hybrid end and Snowden's kind of a hybrid outside backer. Then you've got your interior defensive linemen, very, very thin group. This is a question mark for this team, even if Wilkins is out there. Like, you see Wilkins' grade as a run defender and Max Crosby being an elite run defending edge. You would think their D-line run defense grade would be better than a B-, ranking kind of middle of the pack there for the league. It is the lack of a guy next to Christian Wilkins, where Adam Butler's not a very good run defender, and then the lack of any sort of rotational help that brings that down. Leki Fotu has struggled against the run. Zach Carter got brought in from Cincinnati as a former third-round pick. They had him in that same kind of Tyree Wilson hybrid end role, better than where the Bengals were using him. He made a few plays against the run, a few good defensive stops, but again, very limited kind of tweener role there. The two rookies, Tonka Hemingway, JJ Pegues. Hemingway to me is a Adam Butler future replacement. He is a penetrating athlete on the defensive line. I thought he was overdrafted personally in the 4th round. We'll see how that ages. Ideally, you would have him bulk up a little bit. If that can happen, there might be something there. He's got good agility, so maybe they like the interviews with him and they see something I don't, but to be determined there. JJ Pegues is super fun. Another just crazy athlete who played a little DN, played a little D tackle, played a little fullback, came into the college as a tight end. Like, I think his best use is as the Scott Matlock conversion project, the Patrick Ricard mold for this team. Let's not forget Patrick Ricard sank so that Travis Hunter could swim as a true two-way player early in his career. Now Ricard is just one of the best fullbacks in the league. That's the path I really see for JJ Pegues. He does have some athleticism and had some fun wins. Like he would line up on the edge and like one with a cross chop at Ole Miss. I don't think that's really going to be there at the NFL level, at least not off the edge. Like maybe he can tap into something there, but he legit, like, considering he actually touched the ball on offense, and I know we're kind of misplacing his conversation, but they do have him listed as a defensive tackle. But anyway, like, yeah, the fact that he did actually touch the ball, did play some tight end, I love him as a unique skill blocker to pave the way for Ashton Ginty here. But I'm excited to see how they use him, more so on offense than on defense, but maybe something can click for him defensively. Jonah Lalu did play a decent bit for them last year. That's about the nicest thing I can say about him. So I wish they had better interior D-line depth. I really do. But yeah, fascinating D-line conversation. They're going to get something from this group one way or another because they have Max Crosby, but could be a really special unit if some things go right for these guys, for sure. But then we go to the linebacker group, and I honestly, like, is it ideal? No, absolutely the hell not. Like, they have some weaknesses with this group. There's going to be some deficiencies here, but just kind of going with some veterans that have played a bunch, that kind of play off each other nicely. It does kind of help the floor to the point that I'm not necessarily worried about this linebacker room. But yeah, it's not the best duo. They come in 28th for overall linebacker. Really poor for coverage, 27th to 29th with a D+ grade for linebacker coverage. C+ though for run defense, linebacker run defense. Like, I don't think, again, this is going to be some back-breaking unit. And as long as they scheme around some of the coverage deficiencies, they'll be just fine here. Like at the end of the day, I think we've seen in the NFL, you just don't want to be bottom three and egregious at linebacker. And I think they have enough bodies here to avoid that. But this is not a group of linebackers that's going to help elevate this defense in any shape or form. Hence the C grade overall. But yeah, you signed Jermaine Pratt. Like, we know what Jermaine Pratt is. He's a balanced player. He's got decent size. He's got a good mind for the position, but he's not overly physical. He's not overly twitchy in coverage at this stage in his career. He's a fine overall player. I think it's a fine signing to bring him in from Cincy. 1 year, $4 million deal. He's 29 years old. Like, there's an opportunity for him to kind of get a little bit more back on track. You know, those Cincy defenses the last couple years really fell apart, and the ask on these linebackers was tough in Lou Anarumo's defense. We just talked about that defense in the Colts deep dive. Like, they ask a lot of their defensive players to be very multiple week to week. Granted, this defense can do that at times too here with the Raiders, but as we saw last year, they were more multiple from a year-to-year sense than they were week-to-week with the Raiders. They were at least consistent with what they wanted to do last year. So we'll see if they can get more out of Jermaine Pratt. I mean, in his prime, he was more of a solid, like, low-end 1, high-end 2. Like, he had some good years for the Bengals, so I'm not going to predict that he gets back to that. I think he's more of just an okay player, but maybe reminds me a little bit of like when the Vikings signed Jordan Hicks, where he was kind of a castaway from the Cardinals, and he ended up kind of re-cementing himself as a nice LB1. That's possible with Pratt. It's a decent enough signing. He's a very balanced player. And then you have a Landon Roberts, who's a completely one-dimensional player, so much so that the Steelers literally had a complete LB by committee where Roberts would get the early downs, and then they would take him off the field for Peyton Wilson on later downs. Maybe the Raiders can find that rotation. It would probably be Devin White coming in as a blitzing and coverage threat. He's not much of a coverage threat, but he is a blitzing threat. Maybe they do that. And honestly, I don't hate that. Where Pratt's a balanced, okay-ish player. Roberts is actually a heat-seeking missile, really good run defender. I would have loved for this team to keep Robert Spillane, but did they find a decent replacement from a run defense perspective here with Roberts? Yeah, absolutely. So can they be smart about this? Maybe. And just bring in Devin White and blitz the crap out of Devin White, get the best out of him in that role, get the best out of Roberts. Like, there's a needle to be thread for this to be an okay-ish group. And we'll see if Patrick Graham can get that. But yeah, we know what a Landon Roberts is. Not someone you want covering a blade of grass, but hey, run defense is his thing. So that's where you get the C+ run defense grade, really, where they're closer to the middle of the league from that perspective. Yeah, you got Devin White here. We already mentioned him. Like, he's a blitz-only threat. He's probably the most overrated player of the last 5 years, honestly, like straight up. People were freaking out when the Eagles signed him last year, and one of my good takes of the deep dive last year was like, yeah, I don't know. I think Zach Bond might be the best guy out of this group, and that happened. Devin White gets released. But yeah, Devin White is horrible in terms of play recognition and gap discipline, missed tackles, poor coverage player for the most part, but he's a crazy athlete. Fun to see him land here after in that draft. I think that was the year they took Clelin Ferrell. A lot of people thought they would draft Devin White that year, so it's funny that things have come full circle here. Wouldn't have been too much of a better draft pick either way to go with Devin White. But yeah, he's here. Honestly, keep an eye on Tommy Eichenberg, though. I liked Tommy Eichenberg coming out. He played about 150 snaps last year and did okay for this team. Just full stop. Like, I like Tommy Eichenberg. I think he can be a starter in the league. He's got somewhat limited traits, but you would have said the same thing about Robert Spillane. Like, I think Eichenberg has a good eye for the position. Him and Knight for the Seahawks were my two kind of day 3 sleepers from last year's linebacker draft. And if Pratt struggles or if they get tired of Roberts being a one-dimensional player, Eichenberg's the guy with any form of upside in this group. Not to be a superstar, but to be a starting caliber player. So you heard it here first, I guess. Don't quit on Tommy Eichenberg, even if the opportunities weren't fully there last year. There was some good linebackers here last year with Spillane and Diablo, so more opportunities this year for him. Cody Lindenberg's a nice player. As a Gopher fan, I'm pretty familiar with him. Good eye for the position, good feel and coverage. Not a great athlete or anything like that, but he could never stay healthy. But if he can stay healthy, maybe he can crack the lineup here. And then Jalen Smith is still here too. I don't think he makes the team, but hey, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'm overly optimistic about this linebacker group. It's just, in general, I have a hard time like panicking about linebacker rooms in general. It's just hard for this position to really destroy your defense as long as you have like capable bodies. And I think they do have capable bodies. It's just no one to get overly excited about. So there's your LB room. Honestly, the group I'm worried about with this defense and the overall team, like the unit that could have this power ranking aging like milk, is this secondary. They rank with a C- grade, 30th to 31st in overall secondary grade, and that's a potential problem. Now, there's some upside with this group too, and this unit also gets the wild card icon for me as a whole, in that this unit could destroy this defense in many ways, or it could actually end up being okay and help this Raiders defense maybe play closer to that top 10 level that they did in 2023. And there's some legitimate hope there. Like, there is some exciting young players in this secondary, but they're all entirely unproven. And I still do think Raiders fans, Jacorian Bennett is unproven. I think a lot of Raiders fans are excited about him, and I think you should be. He played really well last year, and I loved the tape on him. He figured it out. He figured out how to stay in guys' hip pockets. He made some really impressive plays on the ball. Finishes the year with really impressive production. I mean, 7 pass breakups. He missed time. He's got to stay healthy. But in 9 games, he had 7 pass breakups, so 1 per game is crazy. And he was targeted 37 times, allowed 18 receptions. That's 49% reception percentage allowed, which is, I love to compare this position and reception percentage allowed to batting average in baseball. Like if you're at 60%, you're hitting about 250 in baseball. If you're at 50%, you're pretty close to like hitting 300 in baseball. The elite seasons of like lower 40s, you're hitting like 350. It's a good kind of way to think about this position, because every corner is going to lose eventually. It's all about your rates of preventing completions. So he batted about 300 in a half a season. Now, can he go do that for a whole year? He was really bad in his rookie season as well, as a 4th round pick coming out. The other thing with him is he missed 29% of his tackle opportunities last year. That's brutal. That is absolutely brutal. And honestly, right now, he's actually not listed as a starter on our lads. I'm willing to bet against that. I think he did enough that you have to play him. Otherwise, I don't know what you're doing if you're the Raiders. But if they are maybe using that as motivation, Pete Carroll is good at this type of thing. And we even saw this with Reek Woolen at times. Reek Woolen, really just horrible tackler in Seattle. And they kind of benched him. They kind of lit a fire under his ass to get better at that. Maybe that's what they're doing. And maybe Raiders fans have a little more information there than what I'm describing here. But I do imagine he's going to be starting. And I mean, he's got 4.3 speed. I love everything he showed on tape last year. It was 9 games after a really bad rookie season, and the guy can't tackle. So he's got some stuff to clean up, but there's a lot of potential there for him to be a good starter. Eric Stokes, I think, and I can't believe I'm defending Eric Stokes at this point, but he's fine as a Band-Aid signing, knowing you have all these young guys, you're figuring things out. Eric Stokes can start as an outside corner. He did for the Packers last year. He was a solid overall player. He struggles to throttle down. You can get him on comebackers and hitch routes and dig routes, but he's got the long speed. He's not going to get beat over the top. He has no ball skills to speak of. He is not a difference-making player at all, but it was a decent enough signing for the Raiders are at. So that's okay. He's going to find a starting role, I think, until things sort through. And then things start to get a little wacky here because right now Bennett can't play in the slot. His size would tell you maybe he can. And maybe that's what they're doing, honestly, is, hey, Darnay Holmes tackles. So Jacorian Bennett, we love the idea of you in the slot, but until you can tackle, we can't play you there because Stokes is an outside corner. He can't play the slot. We like Darian Porter as an outside corner because that's what he did at Iowa State. So maybe that's what they're doing. We don't really know who the starting slot's going to be for them. It could be Darnay Holmes because of the tackling stuff, but I don't know. Like, Darnay Holmes is not a cover player, and there's so much upside with these other guys that seems kind of silly to me. In fact, I think Darian Porter, with how fluid he moves, I mean, the pro comp I had on him was Zion McCollum, and Zion McCollum has spent some time in the slot. I think Porter could maybe play slot for you, but obviously they have to sort some stuff out here. Ultimately, Darian Porter as a third-round pick, super, super fascinating. I would encourage you to go back to my cornerback rankings video on him because we really got into it on him. But basically, sixth-year DB who 3 years into his career converted from wide receiver to corner. He is among the traitsiest corners you will ever see at 6'3", with real speed. Not just the speed, though, because Eric, like, perfect example here. Eric Stokes has the length. He's got the 4.3 speed. He cannot throttle down. He can't change directions. He can't flip his hips. He's got slower feet. Darian Porter, freak among freak in terms of everything you look for, athletically speaking, not just length and speed. So, like, the physical tools are insane. And then you would think, okay, he's a 6-year player. He must have had bad tape, right? Like, that's the only thing that can explain why this wasn't a first-round draft pick, basically. Well, it's not that simple. He was the most shut down corner on a per-snap basis in college football last year. His tape was ridiculous. Locking dudes down on the outside at Iowa State. But he rotated. He didn't start every game. And I don't have the explanation for why that was. But there's a world where he's just really freaking good. Like, seriously. There is that world. I don't think it's crazy. You can't draft the guy too high because he played like 600 snaps in 6 years of college football. But one of the biggest enigma prospects that I can remember. So he's a huge wild card, obviously. I mean, like, dude, he has ball skills too because he's a former receiver. Like, you put the ball in his area, he would find it and pick it off. He is so fascinating. I had a second-round grade on him. They get him in the third. I love the draft pick, but he's got to come out and prove it. They do still have Decamerion Richardson. He struggled in his rookie season. That was not a surprise. He was super raw. Did one thing at Mississippi State, right? Played a ton of off zone and sticking him on an island, playing cover 3 and cover 0. Like, it was different for him, and he struggled, but he, like Darian Porter, has size, speed, and crazy fluid athletic ability. And between Jacorian Bennett, Darian Porter, and Decamerion Richardson, I don't know that there is a more physically gifted trio of corners in the entire NFL right now. I really don't. The technique, the skill, and the production has to prove itself out, but I do stand by that. The physical tools are there, and obviously at this position, that's going to give you crazy upside. So it's not looking great for Decamerion Richardson. He was a 4th-round pick, but there is stuff to work with, and it's a tough position, so maybe something can click in year 2, just like it happened with Jacorian Bennett, who really struggled in his first season. We would have had similar concerns with him. So that's kind of your core 4 at the cornerback position. Although, that said, Darnay Holmes is currently listed as the starting slot, and he did play a lot of slot for this team last year. He loves to hit. He's a physical guy. I like Darnay Holmes coming out, but the coverage side of things has never come along for him, and you just would prefer that he doesn't have to be out there. It's not the end of the world if he is, but you know that that's a slot corner that teams are going to be able to take advantage of. But it is certainly worth noting that it's possible that the 4 guys we talked about are all outside corners, and they're going to have to play Darnay Holmes. Now, like we said, last year they did play base defense a third of the time, so maybe they plan on doing that a little bit more. Who knows? A lot for this team to sort through for sure. But that's definitely your core five to talk about. Kyu Blu Kelly played at Stanford, has bounced around the league about 4 different times already for a young player. And they got like 4 other names in the building. But possibly just those top 5 are the corners that make this team. And then your safety room is very mid. It's towards the bottom of the league as well. I mean, Jeremy Chinn's a nice signing. He's more of a box safety and having to play more of a full starting role here compared to what he did in Washington. It's not ideal. He can play the post. He can definitely play 2-shell, but he's just not the best overall coverage player. He's more of a hook zone, man up tight ends, kind of quasi linebacker type. And they're going to need him to be a full-time starter for them to replace Trayvon Merrick. And those are big shoes to fill, but he's a nice player. 2-year, $12 million deal. Fine enough for what he is. It's more Isaiah Polamau being a starter that you're going to have some hesitations on. Polamau is 6'4", undrafted coming out of USC, ran a 4.5 40. He's crazy traitsy. And again, there's not a whole lot of safety duos in the league with more physical potential than Jeremy Chinn and Isaiah Polamau. They have some freaks in this secondary, man. And Polamau has shown some flashes. He's had some rangy plays on the ball. He's had some interesting hits as a run defender. But undrafted guy that's never been a good coverage player. So take that for what it is. We'll see what his growth kind of looks like if he can hold on to this job. They signed Lonnie Johnson. He's a journeyman at this point. Not much to really say there, but Thomas Harper did get on the field in his undrafted rookie season as well out of Notre Dame. He's got some interesting testing numbers. He had like crazy explosive testing numbers in terms of like the jumps and stuff, and graded out well in a rotational role in about 7 games last year. So maybe something there, maybe not. I'm also not ready to quit on Chris Smith. Didn't get all those opportunities last year. He only played in 1 game, 11 snaps. But that said, I loved Chris Smith's tape coming out of Georgia. There's a very real world where he is the best overall coverage player in this secondary. Jeremy Chinn can do some really good stuff on tight ends and that kind of stuff, but Chris Smith can actually play deep safety. He doesn't have great speed, but I loved his overall feel, and definitely not ready to write him off 1 year into his career as well. So they have some interesting safeties to kind of have some hope for, but nothing proven there. So complete crapshoot in the secondary. Again, lots of upside with physical tools, but downside as well with career production on really all these guys. So that rounds out your defense. This is a polarizing side of the ball for the Raiders. Like, the offense, I think, is going to be pretty good no matter what, and they have some upside there. But this Raiders defense has upside, and they have downside. I think, especially with that defensive line, like I said, they were 9th overall defensive line. There is a world where they're not quite that good. There is. But there's a world where they're a top 3 defensive line as well. And if some of these pieces come together in the secondary with good coaching, we saw this be a top 10 defense just a year ago in 2023. So it kind of splits the difference there. They rank 21st for me on that side of the ball for overall defense, 23rd for pass defense, 21st for run defense. A series note there, we just had the Colts ranking 23rd for pass defense. I had not updated the Raiders quite yet for the Jermaine Pratt edition, which boosts their linebacker coverage grade from a D to a D+, which was just enough to get the Raiders pass defense to jump the Colts from where we just had them. So that's why we see back-to-back 23rd pass defenses there. Obviously, the Colts now 24th. But, fascinating to see how things go on this side of the ball for sure. Let's talk a little bit of special teams before we start to round all this together. So the Raiders special teams ranks 19th. They've had a little bit of a fall from grace here from a couple years ago where this was really one of the premium special teams in the league. The PFF team grade on them was 28th last year. DVOA had them 17th, so that factors pretty heavily for my overall special teams formula. But also, low-key, Daniel Carlson has not been great since I think he made the Pro Bowl in 2022. He's missed a combined, I think, 10 kicks over the last 2 years. He's been very average. He ranks 18th overall for the kicker grade. They are, however, elite at punter. AJ Cole is the best punter in the NFL, so they've got that going for them. And then they just don't really have a return guy to get too excited about. It's been a different collection of guys. Amir Abdullah was okay at it. Dylan Laub did some kicks for them. Trey Tucker did some punts. But they rank towards the bottom of the league for returner without a standout guy there. And that's how you end up with them as your 19th overall special teams. Not a unit to really panic about. Maybe Daniel Carlson can get back on track as one of the better kickers in the league, in which case this would be more of a top 10 unit with the special teams. But let's get to our recap portion here, looking at their strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors. So the Raiders do have some real strengths. The way that this group of weapons is designed, I think, has to be listed as a core strength for this team. This very well could be the best run after catch group in the league. They have a true identity there, so I do have that as a strength. Running back, I do already think is a strength with Ashton Ginty. And then the Max Crosby factor is a strength. We saw that in 2023. Anytime you have a real defensive player of the year candidate player, that's going to lift all tides more than people even realize at times. So real strengths on this team, real weaknesses as well, though. The secondary lines up as a weakness right now. Linebacker, yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to destroy the end results for this team just because it's hard for a linebacker group to do that. It's why it's the least valued position of the defense. But relative to other linebacker rooms, it is a weakness. And then the overall interior D-line depth and rotation and really getting any sort of run defense contributions outside of Christian Wilkins, who may or may not even be there, it's a concern for sure that this team will be able to consistently stop the run. But the wild cards are big for this team, even more so than you maybe realized. Like, I think this Raiders team really does have more upside than they get credit for. Like, if things click with the offensive line, they could be a top 10 offensive line. I actually believe that. And then the D-line as well, if the recovery goes well for Wilkins and Kuntz, that's a game-changing defensive line, one of the best D-lines in the entire league. And the importance of trench play is paramount. So what are we talking about here? Like, could the Raiders have some of the best trench play in the NFL this year? It's not likely necessary, but it is possible. Crazier things have happened. And then the secondary too, like, dude, it doesn't look good on paper right now, but Pete Carroll does have a track record of getting a lot out of questionable groups. He has a decade-long track record of that. And the physical tools in that secondary are through the charts. So that group could be better than we're painting them right now. But until proven otherwise, again, that is a weakness. So that's like a huge spectrum. But overall, hey, 20th on offense, 21st on defense, 19th on special teams. Yeah, I would say the math was mathing on this one. That's how you get your 20th overall team. And at the end of the day, seriously, one of the teams I'm most excited to watch play this year. And to see how things go. But let's take a look at their schedule before we get out of here to see kind of how things might go here, as well as their kind of gambling odds and their final win projection. And honestly, it's hard to find a solid line on the Raiders. Like, some sites, you either have to do 5.5 wins or 7.5. So that, I think, kind of reflects the polarizing nature of this team. But some sites do have them just at 6.5 wins, so that's what we're putting there for their Vegas over-under. They are fourth in this division, which is not a surprise. Like, you got the Chiefs, Chargers, and Broncos, so they're probably not going to win the division either way. But they are 100-1 in Super Bowl odds, which is lower than the final power ranking here. I think, which is probably fair, like for this team to go all the way as opposed to just being a frisky, high floor kind of sneaky playoff contender. Those are two different conversations to be had. But anyway, their schedule is more on the side of being a tough schedule than an easy schedule. Like their division's just going to be tough. It is. As we know, the AFC West is in the conversation for the best division in the league. And how good the Raiders can be is a big part of if that can be true or not. Because some people think this team's just not any good at all. Certainly if they're the 20th best team in the league, like the AFC West is absolutely in the conversation for the best division in the league. But anyway, their division's tough. They have to play the NFC East, which is a very good division. And I think if I had to pick who I would get at home out of that division, I would probably say Washington and Philadelphia. Take away that home field advantage for those two tough games. I think this team is good enough to go on the road and beat the Giants. And, I feel like there's a lot of Raiders fans in Dallas to potentially force an even turnout there. But Dallas has been a tough place to play. So maybe flip Washington and Dallas there, something like that. But certainly not easy to have to go to Washington and Philly either way. But on a positive note, they do get the AFC South. So you're going to get some winnable games in there. With Tennessee and Jacksonville at home, they should be favorites in those games. Going to Indy is still possible. Hell, I have the Raiders ranked as a slightly better team than Indy. So that's favorable. And then you get, outside of that, you get Chicago in Las Vegas, week 4. That could be worse. At New England, week 1, as they're kind of figuring some things out of the AFC East. That's nice-ish. Still probably underdogs there. But then you get Cleveland at home. Like there's some decent draws in here for sure that could lean towards the Raiders surprising this year. Ultimately, it's just going to come down to them taking care of their own business here. As far as predicting this team and betting on this team with this schedule, I'm staying away. I am. This team is polarizing. I'm not going all in on this, but my projection does have them slightly over that 6.5 win mark. And I do lean towards this being more of a 7 or an 8 win team. I do. Gun to my head, I'd probably go over here, but there are enough question marks. This schedule is hard enough that I would, just stay away. I think 6, 7, 8 wins is the most likely outcome for this team. And I will end by saying I think it's more likely that this team is actually good and a playoff team, being like a 9 or a 10 win team, than it is that they suck. I think there is a lot to work with. I love the coaching. They just got to hit some green lights with some of the question marks. But that's going to do it for this Raiders deep dive. For those that questioned how high I have this team, did I sell you or am I still nuts? Let me know. I want to hear from all you guys. If you think I missed anything, let me know as well who you think comes next in this Power Rankings series. We are now into the teens, so things are getting real for sure. We're starting to get into teams that have like playoff or bust expectations, which is really fun. Looking forward to that. Appreciate you guys for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out, and I'll see you later. Cheers.